So next up, podcast listeners, Senator Marco Rubio stops single-handedly a military drag queen story hour. So Senator Marco Rubio of Florida, I guess he heard through the grapevine that I'm sure someone called him and told him, who was in the military, that strange things are happening on military bases across the country and perhaps the world. The United States military is having drag queen story hour for kids, and Rubio looked into it and found out that actually that's true. So in the Epic Times, an overseas U.S. Air Force base, so it's not even in the United States, but it is a U.S. Air Force base, has canceled a children's storytime hour program featuring a drag queen after a Republican congressman demanded the show be dropped. The Ramstein U.S. Air Force Base in Germany canceled the event initially planned for June 2nd, called Drag Queen Storytime, after Senator Marco Rubio, the Republican from Florida, sent a letter on May 26 to Air Force Secretary Frank Kendall urging him to cancel what the congressman called a public-funded propaganda. I like that. It is public-funded propaganda. Quote, Rubio says, I urge you to immediately cancel this politically divisive event and take appropriate disciplinary action against all involved in allowing this gross abuse of taxpayer funding to place children in a sexualized environment, Rubio's letter reads. You know what, Chris, our producer, who's on the other side of the camera, that's what we should do. The next time we hear about a public school, especially at the elementary level, which apparently is legal in our state to do this. It's now legal in our state in Maryland to have drag queen story hour and to teach gender identity and these other kind of ideologies and other propaganda. We should send a letter ourselves to the superintendent and to the teacher who's decided to teach this, and say the same thing. Namely, we should use the same wording, which is, you need to stop doing this because allowing this gross abuse of taxpayer funding and placing children in a sexualized environment, because that's exactly what you're doing. You're using taxpayer money to sexualize children in elementary school. That's pretty good. And by the way, we've said this many times before, but the difference is if you put it in writing, now there's a record of it. There's a record that you have identified that this is happening. And if they don't rebut it, then, of course, you probably have plenty of parents who know that it's happening too, not because they're there, but because their kids are telling them, and they're receiving information like handouts that they're taking home, drawing drag queens, God knows what. Anyway, the military event that Marco Rubio was referring to was to feature drag queen Stacy Teed at the military base's Ramstein Library and was intended to celebrate the month of June as Pride Month. We're celebrating Pride Month at the Ramstein Library with Drag Queen Storytime. The now deleted event announcement on Facebook read, join us with special guests, reader, Stacy Teed. Be sure to wear your brightest and most colorful outfits. In his letter, Rubio noted the U.S. military bases are for warfighting. And the purpose of amenities in these bases, such as schools and libraries, is to support the needs of service members and their families. On installations, quote, outside the continental United States, these amenities play an even more central role in the life of our service members and our families, Rubio said. In light of this, it is completely insane for Ramstein Air Force Base to use on-installation resources for rituals like drag queen storytime. Rubio described events like Ramstein's Library Drag Queen Storytime as extremely divisive because they cause children to interact with intentionally and explicitly sexualized adults. Another good line, which is true, by the way. It's not just a line. So again, he said that drag queen storytime is divisive because it causes children to interact with intentionally and explicitly sexualized adults. Because what else is it to be a drag queen than to be sexualized? What else is it to be LGBTQ plus and teaching it in elementary school, but to be sexualized? There is no other purpose. Clearly, there's no other purpose. And I just think it's remarkable that, we even have to have a conversation that it would be happening in public schools, but the fact that it would be happening in military schools, military bases overseas, and who's in charge? Like, who's giving the, go ahead? Because in the military, you have a chain of command. Who's in the chain of command going, oh, I think this is a great idea, That's what we need, We need to send more drag queens to the Ukraine to help on the front lines. That'll really work. So, an example of the materials featured at the drag queen event at Ramstein military event, according to Rubio, you ready for this? Include books such as The Hips on the Drag Queen Go Swish, Swish, Swish. So, again, you tell me that's not sexualizing children, okay? Again, the example of materials featured at the Ramstein Air Force Base Drag Queen Hour, according to Marco Rubio, include books such as, how he did not laugh when he was reading this, quote, The Hips on the Drag Queen Go Swish, Swish, Swish. The author of the book said they wrote it so that children could experience the magic of drag and to get a little practice shaking their hips or shimmying their shoulders to know how they can feel fabulous inside of their own bodies, Rubio said, because he's reading, of course, from the author's book. These are children, okay? Quote, the last thing parents serving their nation overseas should be worried about, particularly in a theater with heightened geopolitical tensions, such as in Germany, is whether their children are being exposed to sexually charged content simply because they visited their local library. The congressman added, actually he's a senator, an Air Force spokesman confirmed with the Epoch Times on June 1 that the event had actually been scrapped due to scheduling conflicts, and not as a result of the individual speaking out against the event or against the LGBTQ plus community. No one's speaking out against the LGBTQ plus community. They're saying these morons don't belong in public schools, let alone in elementary schools. That's what we're saying. I mean, come on. This is the classic response, right? You just don't like these LGBTQ. No, I don't think it belongs in public schools. The spokesman said in an email that wing leaders of the 86th Airlift Wing had requested the event be broadened to represent the full LGBTQ plus community, but the 86th Force Support Squadron was unable to modify the event in time for the June 2nd scheduled event. So I just had to read this to you because I don't think the American people really know or understand what is happening in their military, not just here on military bases in the United States, but also overseas, and how it's one thing to try to indoctrinate the forces, but now they're trying to even indoctrinate the children of the forces and sexualizing them with books like The Hips on the Drag Queen Go Swish, Swish, Swish. Sorry, that is just too funny. And if that's not enough, in North Carolina, flashcards depicting LGBT themes used to indoctrinate North Carolina preschoolers, ladies and gentlemen. The incident was revealed in a press release from Representative Tim Moore, the Republican Speaker of the North Carolina House of Representatives, the Western Journal reported. Republican State Representative Aaron Paré was alerted to this via an email from a concerned parent. This week, Representative Paré, who's a Republican from Wake, North Carolina, received an email from a concerned constituent alerting her to the use of LGBTQIA plus MOUSE themed flashcards, including a card with the depiction of a pregnant man to teach colors to children in a preschool class at Ballantyne Elementary School. So here we go. Teaching colors, right? You're trying to show and teach children colors. So what they did was they had flashcards for the preschoolers, and the flashcards were the colors of not one color on a card, which is, of course, how you would teach colors. Here is red. And there you put up a red flashcard, correct? Just red. Here's yellow. There's a different flashcard, all yellow flashcard. That would be a true way of teaching colors using flashcards. That's not what happened here. What happened here is a single card had the pride flag on it. and then another flashcard that pulled up had a woman behind a man, and the man was pregnant. So, you know how you see pictures online, especially on social media, and there's a husband and wife, and they're taking like a formal picture, or they had a photographer, and one of the pictures that the photographer had them pose in was the husband, and he's behind the wife, and he has his arms around her, okay? And maybe another picture would be his wife or his girlfriend or whatever. Maybe she's pregnant, and they decided to take pictures, and he's behind her, and he's holding her and holding her tummy. Okay. That would be kind of more of a traditional picture. Perhaps they would see, well, this flashcard that they're showing the North Carolina kids is the wife behind the man, and he's the pregnant one. And Chris, I'm not sure if you could pull this up and show the picture, but it's like, it's on this flashcards depicting LGBT themes used to indoctrinate North Carolina preschoolers. So this is what's happening in your public schools, ladies and gentlemen. This is a public school. It's not a private school. And it happens because we're not pushing back enough, and because you have these idiots that are just like completely and utterly out of control, and, you know, just like trying to control every aspect of your child's life, and basically saying, hey, we're the ones who are raising your children. You no longer have a say in the matter. So we just had to bring this up. Good for you, Marco Rubio, for bringing this up about the military and what's really happening on these bases in the public school system. And in North Carolina, good for you for calling out this school, this public school, using flashcards to indoctrinate children about men who are pregnant. I mean, can you imagine how much dumber could you grow up than saying, men can get pregnant? It's like, what the